Welcome to How to Run for Office and Get Away with It. Today, primaries, caucuses, and bedsheets. We're mining registration lists in Kentucky, surviving California's jungle primary street fight, and mastering the art of the local caucus. Plus, how Gracie Allen's surprise party hijacked the national conversation without a single real policy. The polls are open. Let's get into it. Welcome to How to Run for Office and Get Away with It. I'm Scott.
And I'm B.
And this is episode 16 entitled
Primaries, Caucuses, and Bedsheets. Oh my.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about this one because this is all of the stuff that I get excited about. This is Political Science 101. This is the types of elections and some terminology and things you need to...
It just goes to show the variety of election processes that we have, because obviously the states control those, so there's almost as many different types as there are states.
So, while some of them kind of look the same, the way that they're done and how that affects the way that you run for office is pretty significant. Like, it changes significantly. And it's not just the states. The states are responsible for setting rules, administrating those rules. But local municipalities, they get to decide how their elected officials are elected. So
one of the many things that you should be doing research on before you run, so that you know how the primaries work, how the voting works, who's eligible to run, how your party registration affects all of that.
Well, they are doing the research because they came here.
Yes.
And we're going to tell them.
And we're going to tell you.
Speaking of research.
But they should look it up in their own area, because
there are some, you need to find out on your own.
Some local laws or some state party laws that you need to adhere to.
You need to make sure.
But these are the kind of things to ask about and to find out about.
Yeah, you want to make sure you understand exactly what kind of election that you're running in, which is the point of this episode.
Because it does change your strategy.
It can change your strategy, and it can change the way that people interact with you because they understand how that election works. Or your area may not be very well versed or educated on how people, or on how your election is voted on, right?
Right.
So that can affect the outcome too.
And part of your strategy may be to educate the public on how the voting process works.
Exactly. But in the meantime, speaking of research, I'm just really excited about Artemis 2.
Yes.
I'm gonna get to that topic as fast as I can because I'm so excited.
We watched the launch yesterday with Finn, and I think he was absolutely floored at the idea that it took years and years for them to be able to prepare for that moment.
Yeah. So, like, to the audience at home, we are not recording like yesterday. So we're like a week and a half behind you. So, like, Artemis 2 is hopefully already back now.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But we've been watching everything leading up to it, and all of the stuff that, all of the videos and the all of that, everything that we can find on it, and apps and YouTube and news. So I'm excited about it. I grew up loving. I wanted to be an astronaut for a little while, or an astronomer. I think I used to tell people I wanted to be an astronomer because I would get the glow in the dark stars out of the Frosted Flakes box. It was the prizes.
Yeah.
And we put the stickers, my mother and I would put the stickers and constellations on the ceiling of my bedroom. So I loved space and everything that had to do with space. And obviously I didn't go into being an astronaut.
No.
But,
it's never too late.
Well, it is. It is, in fact, too late. I can't even hardly get out of bed, let alone Earth's atmosphere some mornings. So.
Well, it's easier on you. There's no gravity.
You know what? That's true. And I think that my middle-aged, spine could probably use less gravity.
A little less gravity, yeah.
My back is definitely telling me exactly how old I am. And it says, "You are not an astronaut, madam. You are not an astronaut." But I do strongly encourage our son he's going to go to the Naval Academy. I think I started telling him that when he was 3.
Yes.
I'll only be slightly disappointed if he ends up at MIT.
Right. Either one I think will work.
I mean, I'll accept MIT.
She has high expectations.
No, I expect him to do exactly what he's going to do with his life.
He has talked before about wanting to be the first person on the moon or to help colonize the moon or Mars.
Mars.
Yeah.
He says he wants to be like John Glenn and Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
But now he started talking about being an artist or something like that. So
He said the other day he either wanted to be an artist, a teacher, or a doctor.
Do you go to the Naval Academy for any of those things?
I think you probably could.
You could.
Yeah.
Okay. I will accept this tentatively. No, so I kid, I joke, I encourage our children to do exactly what is best for their life, and we will be there
Of course.
to support them and help them along the way, and to stay back and out of the way when we need to stay back and out of the way,
That's right.
which is not always easy to do. It's also something you have to do as a campaign manager sometimes too.
They're like your children.
I am better at it as a mother than I am as a campaign manager. So anyway, we're talking about primaries, caucuses, and bedsheets. Oh my, and I'm really excited to get into it. But before we do, we got to talk about the people who bring us this podcast.
That's right. That would be political, right?
It's Be Political.
That's right. You know, running for office can be overwhelming, especially when you don't know where to begin. Be Political helps people just like you run for political office with the confidence of having a seasoned campaign manager. With Be Political, you'll find the professional advice you've been looking for, along with guidance and tools you can't find anywhere else. We'll help you stay organized and guide you in making important decisions about your campaign. From learning how to secure that big donor to choosing your campaign color scheme, Be Political is here for you. It's hard to know where to begin when you want to run. Start here. Be Political will show you the way. For all your campaign needs, go to bepoliticalllc.com. And now back to B.
So I'm really excited about this topic. This is stuff that people jump into a race and they don't know what kind of race they're running in.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because there are a lot of big differences from state to state about how elections are run and who can vote and what primaries mean.
And how many people make it through the primary and who you run against and who's eligible. I mean, there's a lot of things. So when we said, you got to research the office that you're running for, that the first thing that you're doing is research.
This is part of it. This is what you need to know.
So what's the first one you want to learn about?
So let's talk first of all, the first election in a cycle is the primary.
Right.
And so let's talk about different types of primaries.
So different types of primaries. We're going to start with the closed primary, which is kind of a hot button issue in a lot of places. The closed primary is when only voters registered with a specific party can vote in that party's primary.
So when you say registered with a party, we're talking Republican, Democrat,
Green Party, whatever party.
anything that is a recognized and properly registered party
within where you're. So as long as the state is hosting their primary on the ballot, which a lot of times they have rules for that, they have to have so many registered voters, a percentage of the population, or it may be that the presidential candidate for that party that was offered up had a certain met a threshold for people who voted for that candidate. So now they're willing to host the primaries. There's all kinds of things. But for the most part, you're going to find, for every part that I've ever seen, you're going to find a primary hosted for at least the Democratic and Republican parties.
Okay. You're saying hosting, that the state.
The state facilitates the primaries for the parties themselves. The nominating process that you experience within the primary election, that's a nominating process that's taking place within your election. So when you are voting in a closed primary, you are voting as a member of that political party to nominate a representative from your party, that person put themselves forth in front of the party by registering through the state to be on the primary that's hosted by the state themselves.
Okay.
So that's the way you kind of want to look at that. That's what a closed primary is. And you're going to find closed primaries in Florida, Pennsylvania, and actually right here in Kentucky.
Okay.
So the thing that you want to remember with a closed primary is that you are in that primary focused only on people who are registered within
Your
that
party.
political party.
Okay.
So a lot of times you can do a purity over pragmatism sort of focus early on, and that you focus on the base and your party platform.
Okay.
And there's no need to really appeal to independents yet, right? Because they can't vote for you in that particular race.
And you're really only competing in that race against people in your own party.
Exactly.
So your goal is to attract as many people, as many voters from that party to you.
Right. So you're exciting your base.
Okay.
The people who are going to vote for a political party, and they're going to vote for whoever is in that political party. The people who are excited about you specifically within that party, and they're not going anywhere. They're sticking with you.
Okay.
So the reason why they're sticking with you has to do with the ideology that you present and the things that you represent, what your platform is. Now, that doesn't mean you become a party purist and you are only focused on those people. It means that your messaging, your 531 at that time, whatever it is that you're talking to voters about during that time, is focused on the aspects of your campaign, of your ideology, of your ideas that are aligned very clearly and distinctly with the political party that you're seeking the nomination of.
So the focus items in your campaign should be aligned with the political party.
Correct.
Okay. And that's what you really want to focus on during a closed primary.
Right. So you want to focus on your party's hardline topics, the one that are all party aligned, right? You roll out your more centric positions after the primary is over. So you're maintaining your previous stance. You're just adding in and focusing on your more moderate centrist sway vote positions afterwards. And you can continue to go back and recall for your base voters the things that so that they understand. I didn't just say that. I believe it. I am going forward with this. We're continuing to bring that up. However, hey, independents and moderate voters, I want you to know that I'm also looking at this. Did you know I'm looking at this and considering this? So you're starting to have the conversation with them too. It's just that they're not part of the conversation yet. But you don't want to alienate them before they're ever part of the conversation.
Okay.
So you want to align yourself with things that get the party base excited in that particular circumstance, things that turn them out. But you want to hold back on the things that are your more sway and independent, not because you're worried about alienating your base, but because you're wasting your pop, your bang.
Because you're not getting their votes right
Because you're not getting their votes yet.
Right.
All right. So you want to get these people excited and then start drawing them in. Like, hey, I'm talking to you guys too.
Okay.
I just started with these guys. They're already over here. You want to come join the party? Because did you know that, we're doing this over here? That sort of thing.
So you want to focus on the more centric topics in your party, not necessarily the things that the independent parties, even if you align with them, your focus should be centered on your own party.
Yes. And of course, that's all of these. This is a generic overview of how you look at these things because every circumstance is different. So there may be a circumstance in your area where you may be running for your party, but it may not be in your best interest to be running a heavy, party-centric view.
So just like everything else when it comes to your campaign, every situation is different. Just because you have a closed primary doesn't mean that this is the strategy that you should use.
Right.
And with all of these examples, I think we have some sample strategies just to make you think about that a little bit more, and the type of primary that you have can change the way you build your strategy.
The type of primary, but also the circumstances that are taking place. So
Right.
it's not a one size fits all. These are more like, hey, this is a good place to start, though.
These are things to consider.
These are things to consider. And there's a good chance that you try that strategy on because that's the type of election you have. And it's like, well, yeah, that actually works.
Right.
It's some of it is just keep it simple, stupid, right?
Sure.
So when you're doing that, the best way that to go with a closed primary is using party registration lists, is doing target to high frequency voters almost exclusively.
You really need
focus on.
You really need to utilize the voter data that's available
Correct.
to you through the party.
And within that voter data, you're going to find not just what people are registered as, but whether or not they frequently vote and if they vote in primary elections. Because there's a lot of people out there who vote in general elections, but they don't bother with the primary, but they're registered for your party. Well, now you're going after people who you think you're just trying to get the Democratic votes, and this is somebody who's not likely to vote at all. And you have to have a different strategy to turn out people who are not likely to vote. You got to talk to them differently. So, because you're making them take an extra step that they were not willing to take before. That's like trying to get somebody to go to the gym. There's got to be other stuff involved.
Right.
You've got to make it worth their while. So you want to do data mining to identify who your likely voters are going to be, and also to get a feel for who is voting in the primary and where that ideology stands and who it is that they voted for in the past in those primaries and who they've nominated for the party. So all of that's important. And, I'd also recommend when it comes to this that you look at your internal coalitions within the party.
Right.
So you want to try to get some endorsements as early as possible with your party aligned interest groups, because those folks, because they're not with a particular party, they're going to be trying to influence the primary. So you want to get to them early.
So as we talked about before, your union leaders, your police and fire leaders that have FOPs and that type of thing, these groups of people within your community that are typically supportive of the Democratic Party.
Correct.
You want to get their endorsement as early as you can, because then that's giving you more support from Democrats in general.
Early on, yeah.
Early on.
And, the other aspect of that is that it is very early identifying who you align yourself with, which also adds to your identity, branding, and messaging. So you want to be looking at that. And
but it's also very important that you get to these groups first.
Right. So when you're looking at this, you want to be looking at anybody that is party aligned but not party involved. You're looking at cultural and activist organizations like the NAACP, Hispanic Heritage Leagues, LGBTQ organizations. You've got organizations that are meant for social causes, environmental leagues, all kinds of things that run specifically within more liberal parties or that are specific to, one side of the aisle or one particular party. And they're not waiting to see who the party nominates. They're wanting to influence who the party nominates.
Right, exactly.
So get to them early.
Let that be you.
And let that be you, especially if it is a keystone point in who you are and what your narrative is for you as a candidate.
Okay.
So that's your closed primary. It's pretty simple. If you are registered to vote with a political party, you go to vote. You get to vote only for the people that are registered within that party for that election. Then you have open primaries.
Which I'm assuming are kind of the opposite of closed primaries.
Yes, but there's like different types of it. We're going full open. We're going like
a full out open primary.
A full Monty open primary.
I believe they have these in Georgia, Texas, and Virginia.
That is correct. So this is when voters can choose which party's primary they're going to participate in each election, regardless of what they are registered as.
So you're registered in one party, but when you get to the polling place, you can select the ballot of whatever party you want.
Correct.
But it's not you can't like get several. You
Right.
can't vote across different parties.
Yeah, you
You're
can't be
still
like
only voting for the candidates within a particular party.
right. You can't be like, I'm voting in the Democratic primary for for U.S. Congress, and then I'm going to vote in the Republican primary for magistrate, and I'm going to vote in the Democratic Party
You
for
still have to choose a side.
county sheriff. Like you can't. Yeah, you got to pick one, and then all of them for all of the offices. So
Okay.
just be clear there. Usually, when you have an open primary state, you want more crossover appeal, which is why a lot of people favor this particular type of primary process. I have mixed feelings on all of these. They all have their pluses and minuses. But voters can choose which party's primary they participate in on election day, regardless of their own registration. So you want to like craft a message that might pull in your disaffected voters, the people who don't really feel like they belong anywhere, who are just like, man, I'm registered. It doesn't even matter. Like, you want to try to pull those people in and give them a home because they already feel disaffected.
So maybe when you're looking at historic numbers, you're not only looking at voters of your party that haven't voted in years past, but members of the other party who haven't voted. Those may be some of your disaffected voters of the opposite party that you can pull in.
Right. And you can pay attention to what those numbers are and whether or not that's the strategy that's right for you in this particular area. But for the most part, you want to look for the people who are sort of in the middle that make the difference, that are either going to show up. You kind of run it like a general election in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that when you're looking at as a person running. It's more of a general election feel.
You have some speed bumps there that you got to deal with that you don't have otherwise.
Right.
So, you've got to be wary of raiders, which is when like you have voters from opposing parties who coordinate to vote in the opposing party's primary
Sure.
so that they can vote for the weakest candidate or the candidate, and then they get the weaker candidate elected in as a nominee for that party, and then they have a strong candidate.
I see.
So if you have the real strategy there, if possible, is you want to focus on getting across the aisle with things. But if you can be the only candidate for your party's primary in that particular race, then you don't need your voters. They can vote in the primary for Republican, and you can be telling everybody, hey, go vote for whatever.
Yeah, but
Because I'm going to beat that schmo.
but in order to steal, for about lack of a better example, steal Republican votes in in that kind of primary, that Republican voter has to choose the Democratic primary ballot.
Right.
So you not only have to convince someone that they want to vote for you when they're in the opposite party, you have to convince them that they want to vote for other people in the primary for that.
That's not really a
party.
concern with those particular voters, though, because they weren't going to show up anyway. And all they're doing when they show up is saying, and I want the ticket that what's their faces
So
on.
they're showing up solely to vote for you.
Correct. That's what you're going for, giving them a reason to show up because they're not showing up for their political party.
Okay.
So they're showing up to vote in that race.
Well, that makes sense then.
But if, you're the only person on your party's platform, or the other way around, you need to guard against this, and this is a big deal. If you're running against somebody else who is a weaker candidate or an ineffectual candidate, or they've just put their name on the ballot because this is part of a bigger, coordinated effort, and they're running as that particular party against you simply to run against you, then the coordinated effort is to have those people show up and ask for the Democratic ballot, even though they normally vote Republican, and choose the Democratic candidate that is the weakest to run against their candidate.
That seems like a huge coordination required.
And yet it happens.
Okay.
It really does happen, especially on the local level, especially at like a county, city level. You see exactly that happen in open primaries.
So what do you do if that's happening in your election? What do you do?
What you do is you have to then appeal to your base and make sure they're turning out to counter the votes, and you need to be vocal about this is what's happening. This other person is, a dino. They're running simply to throw off this. Um are you going to let Republicans make the nominee for Democrat or for the Democratic Party so that it's easier on themselves? Or are you going to sit at home and let them make those decisions for you? That sort of thing.
Okay.
Are you going to let them force this candidate in? Like, you can start running on those. You have the conversation, say the quiet part out loud in that case. That's exactly what's happening.
So your strategy for getting the vote out is not only the focus on your party supporters of you, but your party in general.
In that particular case, yes.
In that type of case.
Because if you have one Republican running in a primary, and then you have 2 or 4 Democrats running in this primary, well, you've already split your party, and Republicans don't have anyone to vote for, but they'll still show up to vote. So why not get a Democratic ballot?
Right.
And influence that election.
It could be a situation where people will be voting specifically to spoil your race.
Correct.
Okay.
So we've talked about closed primaries, which
And
have
open primaries.
Yeah, so closed primaries have the advantage of having only the members of the political party choose the nominee for that political party.
Right.
The drawback is people who aren't part of the political party don't have any say in who gets to be on their ballot in the general election. Then you have open primaries that lets people vote for whichever primary they want to, and that's great. Everybody gets to be involved. Downside is you can be voting for somebody who has an ideology that has nothing to do with the political party they're being nominated to represent, and that's because you can vote in a primary whether or not you belong to that party.
Okay.
So in this particular instance, we have a nonpartisan primary, which is also what we call a jungle primary or a top so many primary, depending on how many. Top 2 is what we're usually going with.
Okay.
But if you're going with a council at large, you might have a top 4 or a top 8, depending on whatever. So this all the candidates appear on the ballot.
Okay.
And a nonpartisan primary, and then the top 2 or 4 or however the top number of finishers advance to the general.
Okay.
And then regardless of what their political party is. And then they get voted on again.
So party registration, party affiliation on the voter side doesn't matter.
On the voter side.
In the primary, you get a ballot with everybody on it,
Mhm.
regardless of party, and the top 2 vote getters then run again in the general.
And you'll see that with nonpartisan offices that have people running.
Right.
And you may have where you register with a political party, but it doesn't matter what political party you are in the election at all.
So, for example, in our district, our city commission is a nonpartisan election.
Correct.
So on our ballots, both the Democrat and the Republican ballots have all of the city commission candidates in
Correct.
the primary.
And it doesn't matter how many, however is
We
running.
vote in the top, I think in our case, the
8.
top 8, then run in the general.
Right. And then in the general, the top 4 are the ones who become
So
the city commission.
in our case, our election has 2 different types of primary.
Right, because that is a nonpartisan race. It's not dictated by the requirements of any kind of party. However, this exists as well in other states where they have candidates that appear on the ballot for their U.S. Congress. This is the rules for U.S. Congress in California, Washington, Louisiana. You may have in the general election 2 different Democrats that are on the ballot. You may have 2 different Republicans. And it's because they go by the top 2 vote getters in the primary.
Right.
So your strategy with that is you want to consolidate the lane. If you're a Democrat in a red district, this is sort of like what I was talking about before. You want to ensure you're the only Democrat so that you're not splitting votes. So if you're the only Democrat running, the other people running are splitting votes. You're getting all of the Democrat or more liberal. You're getting the most votes because you have consolidated your party, your lane.
So a strategy like this sounds like the state party gets very involved in in encouraging or discouraging candidates.
It can, and if you are running in a district where your party is not the majority, it may be actually that you want them to stay out. You want the state or national party to back off so that you can survive in that district by distancing yourself some from them. So you're running in an area where you're running against 6 Republicans, and you may end up being one of the 2 top vote getters because they have the majority of people who are, you know, voting for the Republican candidates, but there was only one Democratic candidate on the ballot, and all the Democrats in the district outnumbered
Right.
the 6 split on that. So, you got to consider that.
So this really makes your analysis that you do at the beginning of your campaign, where you determine how many votes you need in any given district or any given region to be able to win. You have to consider that maybe the Republican side is dividing itself by 6 by having that many candidates, right?
Definitely a consideration.
So there can be advantages to that.
Right.
Okay.
And then whether or not they will coalesce behind a candidate after that's been whittled down will also be a factor. So all of these things matter. It's about getting to know and understand your district intimately to know that that's how they're going to respond.
So this type of primary, to me, just from a layman's perspective, seems like the most fair. But it also seems like the most work.
It can also be ruled by majority in your district, which means that you never get the opportunity to be represented in any way. Because in this way, it means that the majority party, even if it's slightly more than the other, is pushing candidates through, and you never get to have the other party's candidates on the ballot.
Yeah, but do they have enough of a coalition to have the top 2 candidates be from the same party? That seems like an uphill battle to me.
It depends. Again, it depends on whether things are organized there and what kind of level of power they have, but it does tend to disenfranchise the minority voters in an area, whether they are more conservative or more liberal in their political leanings. It just ends up being that whoever has the most power in that situation will smother out the other one and then bicker between themselves. That tends to be the evolution of that.
Okay.
And it ends up disenfranchising quite a few voters because they see that no matter what, they're always outnumbered. So they never ever have a candidate on the ballot. So a lot of times when it's not.
And I would venture to say that isn't that how the system was designed? So that any group that has a vast majority in an area should have the representation?
No, our government was designed to ensure that even if you're a minority, you have a voice that has to be heard in some way, and that you have to be recognized in some way, and that your concerns had a place to be heard and redressed.
Okay.
But that would be a tyranny by majority, and that is not a fair and democratic society either. So this is the debate regarding this.
Right.
That's the debate regarding every single one of these. There's great merit to democracy in their implementation. There's great drawback in their implementation for democracy. It's just different approaches and how it's being executed. Their job, you guys out there, you beautiful people who's willing to step up. Your job is to understand what that process is and use it to your advantage.
And make it work for you.
Okay. So if that's singling yourself out as a Democrat and being the only Democrat running against 6 Republicans, and that can push you up because they're all split, but you've got that small coalition. That may not be the way to go. That may be the way to go for one race, but another may be to just run the middle because maybe you're running in a party that's the majority in that district. Maybe you're the 6, right?
Right.
So your best might be the running somewhere down the middle. Middle might be the kingmaker.
Okay.
So you need to know your constituency, your district intimately, so that you can accurately predict what they're going to do so that you know how to approach them.
Okay.
Um, Now, we had the wide open primary, right? No, we had the closed primary, open
Closed,
primary,
open, and the
nonpartisan,
nonpartisan, the jungle race.
jungle race. That's where everybody's on there, and then you just
Take the top.
weed
top.
whack it to the
Right.
top. So now we've got the partially closed race. Just partially closed. It's just partially closed.
Okay.
So state law requires a closed primary, but they allow the parties to decide whether they permit unaffiliated or independent voters to participate. So members of the opposing party are still strictly excluded. You've registered for a party. It's not ours. So you can't vote in our election, right? But you're registered to vote, but you're not registered with a party. You can vote in our primary. And this can create a situation where state law permits parties to allow unaffiliated voters to vote, but none of the parties are like, yeah, it's cool. It could be the parties are like, no, these are our primaries. You can go home now. And you see that in my home state of Maryland and the state of Oregon. Both have, it's left to the parties themselves to decide, but but all of the parties are like, "No, we're good." So, we're good. Connecticut, and Oklahoma also have closed primaries with discretion left to the parties, and I think they have parties that allow.
So in these states, when you register to vote, you can identify yourself as non-affiliated, but you can be invited to vote from a certain party.
Correct. That is correct.
You can be allowed, not invited. You can be allowed to vote for a certain party.
Correct.
So in this case, independent voters who don't necessarily want to be associated with a party officially still have the opportunity to vote on a party ballot.
Which is important to a lot of people who are unparty affiliated because that gives them at least a say in who's progressing to the general election, on who's on the ballot.
Right.
So they get to at least choose who progresses in some instance.
But in that case, you're not getting a true representation of your party support.
Exactly.
So
and that's your downfall.
You've got people who are voting for your candidates who don't have any association with your party. They're not deciding platforms. They're not participating in your party activities.
Correct.
But they can come in and actually spoil your election.
Absolutely. Yes. And, that is the argument in favor of having a closed primary. Is that if you're nominating somebody to represent your party's platform, why would you let people who are not part of that party choose the person who represents that party's platform?
Hence the reason why Maryland can but doesn't.
They have the option.
Okay.
So that it's left to the party's discretion. And in Kentucky, they don't allow people to vote in the cross party platforms because they go by the idea that it's the parties that are nominating the candidates to.
Right.
So you need to be part of that party. But, there's benefits to the open. I see the other side. I see that, having disenfranchised voters who don't want to be associated with any particular party. And, if anybody could see it right now, I mean, good Lord, what's going on in this country? Who wants to be associated with either party right now? They're both looking pretty bad. Although I got to say, one is looking particularly bad.
One's a little worse than the other.
One a little worse for wear at the moment.
So if you're a candidate in this situation, in a partially closed election that is allowing independent voters, you basically have to what? Yeah.
You want to have an invited guest sort of approach. Your message needs to be to make independents feel welcome without alienating your lifelong party members. You're using phrases like expanding our tent and building a winning coalition and pulling people or bringing people together. You're wanting to have a
that big tent party.
Feel, yes. So one of the ways that you can achieve that is you're using data filtration. That's where you have you're pulling from your district lists, which is the party faithful people, which from people who vote in the primary election every time, who are vote in general elections every time, people who have, and if you're using Vote Builder, they have a high party score. They have a thing on there that gives them a score based on a bunch of different analytics that let you know that this is a person who's likely to vote for your particular party. So you're looking for those people, and then you're looking for the ones who are unaffiliated. They don't necessarily vote in the primaries, but they vote in every single general, and those sorts of people.
So there's different criteria to look for on the independents.
The independents likely care more about results than rhetoric. Otherwise, they would have been pulled in by some rhetoric that somebody else was saying.
So they tend to be particularly supportive of particular candidates.
Yes, and they show them.
Yeah.
They want to know. Show me. Show me what you're talking about. Prove it to me.
Okay.
And you want to consider that in how you're putting your campaign message out there. If you're saying that you want to make changes in your community by cleaning up the streets, you might choose a campaign that is putting that message out there by having your campaign volunteers adopting a highway and wearing your campaign shirts while they're cleaning it.
Right.
You might, and you're going to be out there with them. Don't expect your volunteers to be cleaning up a highway if your butt isn't out there cleaning up a highway. I can tell you that one right now. But independents, they're more likely to want to see action rather than hear rhetoric. And, your mailers should have some sort of heavy policy and light on the partisan, like, this is what they want to take from you, because that's just going to get an eye roll. You don't want to use those hardline tactics. You want to be talking about, we're cleaning up streets here in Springfield, and this is how they want to see those types of things in their flyer, not the partisan crap,
right?
As it would be defined by them.
So I think coming up at some point in the future, we're going to do an episode on developing strategies based on who your electorate is. So there are different things to focus on depending on who the voters are, who you're trying to appeal to, and who your opposition is. So if you have a partially closed primary where you're going to have independents voting for you, you have to almost have two different strategies going on at the same time so that you're able to appeal to both sets of voters.
Yes, and that is going to be something that you have to consider. It depends on what is happening within the party platform that's taking place, who you're running against there, who you're going to be running against in the future, who it is that you need to talk to. All of it factors in.
Right.
You got to be looking at all of that. And so it depends on what's happening in the environment that these elections are taking place in. So if you're running in a partially closed primary and they've decided to open that up, then you want to ensure that you're kind of in lockstep with the party leadership's reasoning for opening that primary.
Right.
For usually.
I mean, they would do that because they feel like it's going to benefit them, right? So there should be some reasoning behind agreeing to do that.
But the reasoning behind that means that they're probably targeting a specific group of voters, which means that you can ride that wave of whatever and target those voters as well.
Or you
makes sense for your area.
Or you may have to overcome that.
Or you may have to overcome it too.
Okay.
Yeah, both are. These are forces that are at play around you.
Okay.
You've just got to roll with it the way that it works best for where you are and what election you're running.
Right.
Right.
So I'm guessing if we have a partially closed primary, we also have a partially open primary?
We do, in fact, have partially open primaries. And you're probably thinking, well, like, what if it's partially closed? Isn't that the same thing as partially open? And you would be surprised to know, no, it is not.
No, it is not.
It's not. This is when voters
These names are not intuitive.
They do not have to vote, or voters do not have to register with a party to vote.
In a partially closed.
But the act of choosing the ballot, that they walk in and they're like, I need a Democratic ballot, please.
Now they're a Democrat.
As soon as they ask for that ballot, they are officially registered with that party for that particular
So the poll workers will take note of which type of ballot that they choose. And their affiliation, their official registered affiliation can change to that party.
Correct. And it's publicly recorded because that's part of public information that you voted in a specific election.
So you lose your independent or your non-affiliated registration at that point.
Correct. And that's what they have in Illinois, speaking of Ohio, and Tennessee.
Okay.
So they have partially open primaries, which is basically you get to go in and you get to decide right then what party you're going to vote for in your primary, just like a partially closed, but it's not left to the parties at all. Anybody can. But when you're working in a partially open primary, you're working in areas where you and I can attest to this wholeheartedly. Being in Kentucky, we're surrounded by Ohio and Tennessee.
Right.
And those particular cultures, they're a lot of the reason people are hesitant to pick a team, so to speak, or a party ballot is because they don't want to be on a list.
Right. That's why I registered as non-affiliated to begin with.
Right. So they don't want to be on a team. They don't want to be associated with anything. They don't want to be identified as that particular thing. They simply just want to be left alone and to express their God-given right to vote in an American election for their representative without being harassed by phone calls and mailers sent to them
Right.
and their information collected. And that's what a lot of it comes from is that. So you want to, your team needs to be trained to explain the process of voting in a primary, in a partially open primary, and how it benefits them from being involved in that primary and why that benefit is greater than the idea that they're going to be on some list or affiliated with a particular political party.
That sounds like an uphill battle.
It can be a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's really a system that encourages a fight towards the middle.
Okay.
The open invitation branding in that is sort of what I recommend. Since voters can technically participate, your digital ads on social media and that sort of thing should target your high propensity voters, people who are just regular voters in your district.
Okay.
And not just for your party, but just regular voters because it's open. It's, again, this is more of like a general election sort of situation.
So it's a little less of get out the vote for people who haven't historically voted.
Right.
And it's focused on people who are going to be at
who
the
are
polling
definitely
place.
going to vote. And then you can narrow that down again by who most likely aligns with your ideology. And then you're then looking at where you can pick up votes. So you have a lot of temporary voters, and those temporary voters are actually kind of your best leads.
Okay, because they're enthusiastic enough to
They're enthusiastic
vote.
about voting.
Right.
They're going to show up for somebody.
Right.
But they don't have anybody to show
They're
up
highly likely to be involved in
if you give them a reason.
Okay.
If you touch them and say, I want to talk to you directly, once they feel directly spoken to, they're going to get involved.
Okay, so the next type of primary election, this one is not used very widely, I don't think.
This is a unique thing that you see in New York and Connecticut.
Okay.
And so I think that it's interesting. Like all of these that we're describing, we've talked about the positives and negatives as it applies to voters, government, all that kind of stuff. So this one is truly a unique and interesting way that they do things here. But I get it, and I don't hate it. I'm not going to hate on it.
Okay.
Right? So the multi-party partisan primary is when a candidate can be a nominee for multiple parties.
The multi-party partisan primary.
Right. And so you'll appear, if you are a nominee of multiple parties, you will be on multiple ballots
on the primary. Okay.
Right. So, you might be nominated in that area for that particular office by Democrats and Green Party.
The candidates can be on ballots for multiple parties.
Right.
So they get the chance to have the support from different parties during the primary.
Correct. So in a lot of ways, the parties end up acting like special interest groups.
Okay.
In this way, because what you're actually doing is seeking the endorsement of those political parties.
So what happens if you end up being the nominee for multiple parties?
Well, it's fine because you're going to be on the ballot in the general then,
Okay.
right? So if
Does that happen? I mean, in New York politics, does
Well,
that
sure.
happen that there's somebody from say the Democratic Party is also a nominee for another third party or
Sure,
a non-mainstream party, I guess?
absolutely.
Okay.
You can be a nominee for the Democratic Party and for the Democratic Socialist Party. You can be a member of the Republican Party and the Whig Party. I mean, you can do that. Um, what benefits you have to that is that you end up getting cross endorsement. You can secure some of those minority party idea lines, the underrepresented philosophical ideas in your community by reaching out and possibly becoming a candidate on that particular political ballot.
Okay.
And when you're doing that, you can actually build a broad support coalition because you've become more inclusive of
Right.
more ideas. Obviously, you don't want to seek the nomination of a political party that is,
In opposition of
in-
what you're
of
what
what
you're
you're
running for.
exactly what
Right.
your core
Of
beliefs or
course.
stances are.
That party should still represent your core beliefs.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So this gives you a little bit of branding flexibility. You can use the minority party line to appeal to voters who like your platform but dislike your majority party brand.
Right.
So you're
I think
looking.
there's a lot of that going on right now.
There is. So that's giving you a way of saying I'm a member of this political party, but I I lean this way.
Right.
It gives you the leanings. So that does allow that to be a way of better defining who you are.
Sure. That makes sense.
All right. It does also then require a third party liaison.
So someone on your staff who is dedicated to that particular group.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So so you want them dedicated specifically to managing relationships with that specific party
Okay.
and their leadership. They want to have a good relationship with that leadership. So other than that, I think the drawbacks that you're going to experience in that again is that you're being identified with those parties, both
Right.
of them.
Right.
When you're identified with anything, you run the risk of having uncontrollables, things
Sure.
that are part of your brand that you don't have the ability to control how that's viewed.
Okay.
And so, again, like you were just saying, it in keeping with that, people are feeling disenfranchised or are noticing the brand of both major political parties is tarnished. So they're feeling or not getting the approval ratings that
There's not a lot of people who are 100% behind either the Republican or the Democratic Party at this point.
but there's a ton of people who are 100% against that.
Oh, yeah.
So, a lot of people are utilizing this in New York and Connecticut where this exists in order to more define themselves as like, hey, I'm not off the beaten path, but I am, leaning this way. And that's great. That's their way of saying, you can't define me by what this group does.
Right.
But when you're doing that, you are giving some of that to that minority party.
Yeah.
And when that leadership is a little rogue, you get caught up in that and are seen as a leadership member of that party as a nominee of it. Or
Right, right.
that, or being on their ballot. So
So
that can be the drawback.
it can be a little touchy.
That's something to consider if you're running in that type of race.
Okay. And finally, I think we have the simplest, supposedly the simplest, the caucus nomination. And we hear about caucuses a lot when it comes to Iowa for the presidential election because I think they're the only ones that use a caucus to decide their presidential nominee. Is that right?
They're the only ones who do presidential nominee. Although there has been limited use of the caucus at other times. In fact, that happened here in Kentucky for a primary.
Okay.
Rand Paul was on the running in the Republican primary for president, he did not want to give up his U.S. Senate seat, and it was an election year for him.
And he could not run for both Senate and president.
Correct. So that particular year, well, at least not in Kentucky.
In Kentucky,
because you're not allowed to be on the ballot for two different offices at the same time in Kentucky. That is not necessarily the case in other states.
Check local listings.
Check local listings on that particular rule. So they had the Republican Party opted to have a caucus for their primary that year in order to allow for the nomination of Rand Paul in their presidential primary and allow him to remain on the primary ballot.
Now, see, that just seems like dirty pool.
A lot of people felt like it was.
Yeah.
A lot of people felt like it was dirty pool. But, I mean, he wasn't ultimately a presidential candidate. And
so it was kind of a waste of time for them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they did all that ruggamaroo and he wasn't even close to ever, But, hey.
Yeah.
He's entertaining. So
what is, if you happen to be in Iowa and are running for president, what is your strategy?
Well, it's important to know that while this is something that is used for Iowa president, this is something that does get used around the state for other elections. So check to see if you are having a primary caucus in your particular area for the office that you're running for.
Okay.
So with the party caucus, it's basically if you are a registered member of that party and you show up, you get to vote.
So a caucus is a big meeting.
Yes.
You can imagine under a big tent or in a meeting hall where all of the members of the party get together. That's their one opportunity to get together to nominate their candidates.
Right. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot more politics involved to it. I think it more closely resembles the national conventions that you see.
Sure.
Because you've got a lot of people who are, you've got a lot of people looking for personal endorsements and
definitely a lot of politicking going on.
Right. And so then you've got everybody who was willing to drive there and show up and come to that particular.
Then they're probably passionate about what's going on too.
And they're probably involved in that, and they know what the deeper conversations are and what the party conversations are and who's affecting what. So a lot of times people are driving hours in order to get there, in order to be involved in that vote.
It's like a microcosm of your community electorate.
Yeah. And so that's something you want to keep in mind when observing a party caucus, is that their applications to other aspects of your campaign, whether you're running in a primary caucus or not. Likely not, but there's still things to observe and learn from it, especially how political parties operate if you are running in partisan political office, you're likely going to be involved in some way in the political party. And so you're seeing a lot of the same strategies that are used in caucuses that are used in state and county and even national conventions.
Getting party members on your side or making sure that you can effectively communicate with them.
Building coalition,
right.
That sort of thing.
Okay.
So the strategy when you're doing we're just going to cover this. I mean, it's, again, the chances you're using this, pretty slim, but, but you're still utilizing it in other areas. You want to use a captain system. So you need a captain at every precinct or table to keep supporters from switching sides during any kind of debates that you have taking place, anything that you have coming.
A lot of manpower on.
You need people who are specific to the specific precincts, the groups, the voting blocks that you have in that arena. You want somebody dedicated to each one of those blocks, and they need to stay on them the whole time. They need to be like, but you're still on our side, right? We've still got you. We can count on you. It almost sometimes has the feel of like a Wall Street floor, but politically.
Oh, that doesn't sound stressful at all.
It's a little stressful. So your supporters have to be trained to speak effectively to neighbors in high pressure public settings.
Sure.
So you want people who understand that, I mean, this is a high pressure public setting. Your volunteers are, like I said, but we still got you on board, and we still got you, and you're coming in, and how many votes do we have in your precinct? And
We need some go-getters.
you need people who are fast on the move, and you want cat herders. You want people who can herd cats.
Okay.
Organization is king in this, or queen. Actually, it's queen. Let's be honest. Organization is queen in this.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not about who has the most fans. It's about who can get people to sit in a gymnasium for 3 hours on a Tuesday and do this.
Right.
Right. So you don't need fans. You need people who are willing. You just need
dedicated.
So you need to get them passionate. So people go after getting them passionate about you, but you don't have to have them passionate about you. You can have them passionate about a shared position.
You got to give away a lot of T-shirts.
Actually, in this particular setting, it does help to have stuff like that. You want swag. You want fans. You want something that's highly visible that you're going to see everywhere, but fingers crossed does not end up being trash that you're seeing on the ground.
So you want these foldable fans that have your name on it.
Maybe. I don't know. Look at the setting, look at the thing that people need, and try to prevent it from being trash.
Okay.
This is my goal in these settings, because you don't want to see people walking across your name.
Right.
You don't want to see people like that gets associated, your name, litter, right? So you want to try to avoid that if you can. But
that's good advice, always.
You want that name ID concentrated. You want the illusion, if not the understanding of the vast support. And that it becomes, look at all the people supporting that tribe. I would be part of that tribe. They look cool. Anyway.
So these are very different primaries, and they take very different strategies. Check your local listings to see what you have in your particular race in your area. These are just the primaries.
Yes. These are what apply to, the primaries are what generally is the most diverse in how we handle who makes it to our general elections. And then our general elections tend to be a lot more cut and dry.
Right.
The actual choosing of the candidates that remain.
Okay.
So that's where we have our two main types of elections here for
general election.
General election.
So these are the general election rules.
Yeah, and there's two different ways that we see this done. It depends on who, where you live, but first to post is the plurality, and that's the most common that we see here in the United States. Primary, general elections. It's how all of your U.S. almost all of your U.S. House and state general assemblies are done. It is the most common election.
Right.
So this
he
is
with the most votes wins.
The candidate with the most votes wins, even if they don't get 50%.
Right.
It's whoever has the most votes.
Okay.
So that is a first opposed. That's your plurality election. And so the thing that I spend most of my time repeating to people in this particular type of election, which is 99% of the time what I'm working with is this type of election, it's that you don't need 100% of the vote.
Right.
You don't even need 51% of the vote if there's more than two of you running.
Sure.
You just need more votes than the next guy. That's it.
That's it.
All you got to do is focus on your high turnout precincts.
So this is where your analysis.
This is where your analysis.
Where your analysis comes in, where you're determining how many votes you need from each precinct.
Right. Because you're not there to get 100% of the votes. You're there to get the most votes. So stop intimidating yourself by looking at what is in that particular area, the district that you're running in.
Okay.
Stop stressing out that, you've got 72,000 people that live in your district. I've got to get 72,000 people on board with me. Well, no, you don't, because of those 72,000 people, how many of those are registered voters? How many of them are even eligible to vote?
Right.
Now you've cut that down, and then, how many of them do you need to vote for you?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that number keeps getting
It
smaller
keeps getting smaller.
and more manageable.
Sure.
So that's the one that most people are familiar with. Again, you don't even have to have 50%. You just need to have more than everybody else. The other one that people tend to think of, it's the way we tend to think about elections, even though it's not necessarily true.
Right.
And that is the majority to win, which
See,
is,
in that case, you have to get over 50%.
it's 50% of the vote plus one vote,
Right.
right? So that does exist here. Georgia's general election, you hear a lot in the news in Georgia where they have to have a special election or runoff election.
Okay.
This is why you have to have 50% plus one vote in order to win a general election in Georgia.
Okay.
And that tends to be, you see this a lot in the South. This is a policy in a lot of municipal areas and in local elections. So this may be the rule in your election.
Right.
So make sure that you're looking to see whether it is the first to the post or majority to win.
Okay.
And again, first to post, you just have to have more votes than everyone else. Majority to win, 50% plus one. And then if you're in Georgia and you're following those rules, what happens is if nobody gets that 50% plus one, they take the top two people
And run
and
run
run
again.
them again.
Okay.
Um,
So you have to budget for that. You have to plan for that potential of a runoff in those
well,
areas.
that's exactly right. You always want to keep a runoff fund in this particular type of election. You want to keep that in the bank. You can't spend everything in that first round. If this is what it's looking like, you need to budget this.
So
needs to be-
especially if there's more than two candidates, this is the very likely outcome of this race.
Yeah. And so, you want to budget for that specifically. It's always it's a good policy when you're budgeting your campaign to overestimate what it is that you need to hold back in a lot of ways anyway. You want to keep some squirreled away for sure. You want to make sure that this is planned for. So, the next thing that you need to do in that, though, is you need to have a coalition pivot. So if you're one of the people that makes that top two in that runoff, you need to have a place to run to for more votes. That comes from the people who voted for other people that were in that.
Right.
Right. So you've got to have somebody that you can immediately start courting their voters and candidates who are willing to endorse you.
So you have to
do it.
immediately start running a different campaign at that point.
You don't necessarily have to immediately start running a different campaign if that is what you planned on. If you were aware of this being a facet of something that you will need to do, you're going to look at the people around you and who it is, who their base is and who's supporting them, and look for commonalities.
Okay.
Look for things that you can speak to. Speak to it during your campaign. And then if you're one of those top two, you start heavily focusing on that particular topic and pulling them in and saying, hey, I've been talking about that all along. Make that part of your strategy that you're going to have to court those other voters. And then what's really important to recognize, the real challenge that you have to overcome in that particular election is runoff fatigue. You're already working in an uphill battle with voter fatigue.
Oh yeah, definitely.
When it comes to local elections, especially, people are they're overwhelmed by the number of options that are a lot of times at the local level. They're not very familiar with what it is that the positions do. They don't know the names very well. They're not familiar with any platforms. And so a lot of times people skip those local elections. And we're going to talk about that in another episode. But I think, you're already overcoming that to get people to show up to vote. And then you've got to get them to do it a third time.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have those people ready to turn out. And so those people that you're trying to court, they're already, disgruntled and feeling disenfranchised that their candidate didn't win.
Sure.
You want to give them a home and a reason to show up for a third time because they've now voted twice and their candidate is just like not getting through. So why am I showing up for a third time? You've got to give them reasons. So that's a real hurdle to have to overcome.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that covers all the election types that we have.
Yeah, I think it does. Well,
Uh,
we talked about the title of the episode mentions bed sheets.
yes.
Now, what is a bed sheet ballot?
A bed sheet ballot is something that it's an old term, but we use it in politics. It means that there are just a ton of people on that ballot. Like, it is just pages. It's literally in reference to the ballot is the size of a bed sheet to fit all of the
Now, is that because there's a lot of candidates or a lot of offices?
there. Yes.
Okay.
So when you're looking at that, you're looking at elections that have your municipal races, your large city races, your if you have races that happen to be federal, state, and local, those tends to be bed sheet ballots. And the reason why we want to talk about that, as a matter of fact, is because you need to recognize that you're on a bed sheet ballot. And when you are on a ballot where there's 4 offices that are getting voted on and there's only 2 names in each office, well, it's easy for people to remember your name. It's not a lot of names to wade through.
Right.
But if you're on a bed sheet ballot, that is just so much to get through. And where is your name on it? And you have to make sure people know where you are on the ballot, what office you're running for, and what your name is. So, and whether or not there are other people on the ballot with the same name as you.
So it's more than just name ID.
It's more than just name ID. You've got to have an information campaign about what you're running. Like, you need them to remember what your name is running for.
Sure.
You can't depend on them just seeing your name on the ballot and being able to check it off, because it's like, oh, I didn't know what they were running for, but I remember their name and I remember I liked them. And that
Because your name's going to get lost on that ballot.
right. So you need them looking for your name, knowing what it is that they're looking for and where you're going to be at on it.
And so we have an example of somebody who happens to have a good last name to be at the top of the ballot
Oh yeah.
as part of a non-traditional party.
Listen, this is one of my favorite people too. So a lot of times we end up doing these history things, and I'm talking about just like people that it's always things that just tickle me to no end.
Right. Of course.
And it's people that, like, these are the people that if I had the ultimate dinner party, these are who I'm inviting, right? But this woman, this is my second favorite comedian of all time.
Right.
And I know you know this because I spend the holidays with Gracie Allen. So we're talking about, if you are unfamiliar, Burns and Allen. George Burns lived to be 101.
Right.
And kept on trucking. He kept acting until he
But
was.
before he was 101, he was part of a duo.
But before he was 101, he was in all kinds of stuff. Please look up George Burns' movie career in the 70s and 80s. He's hysterical. But before that, he was part of an old vaudeville team with his wife, who was just as much as, and he would tell you, even more funnier than him. Or even more funny. He was the straight man in this duo, but she was a genius, and I love her so much. Gracie Allen. And Gracie Allen, as if she wasn't already near and dear to my heart, and I do an excellent impression of her, but I don't know if we'll include that in this podcast. We're going to let Gracie speak for herself.
Yeah.
But do you remember a few years ago when Steve Colbert ran for president?
Yes.
Yeah. So everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And this is just like that movie from forever ago. Robin Williams played a comedian who ran for president and won. So like everybody thinks that this is like this new concept or this funny, outrageous concept that would never happen. Well, Gracie Allen decided that she was running for president in 1940. Now, 1940, I don't know if you know, if you were good at history or paid attention, there wasn't a lot going on in 1940.
No, every now was pretty stable.
It was a lot like right now. Everything was real calm and
Right.
chill, right? 1940. No, so we're still pulling ourselves out of the Great Depression. And we've got this ever-growing sense of doom of a world war that's coming and knocking.
Right.
And so in comes Gracie Allen with the most legendary.
Now they had their radio show was very, very popular at that time. And
So this would be like they were like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler level
that
of
level of comedy.
comedy. Like people, like they were top echelons, uh, best top rated show on the radio.
Right.
They were kings and queens of comedy. And so what happens becomes it's one of the most brilliant pieces of satire in American political history. So amidst all the tensions of the Great Depression and then, the ever threatening World War, Gracie is like, you know what? I'm going to run for president. And the way to handle serious times is just a healthy dose of nonsense. Now, it's important to note that this was a bit of a marketing campaign for them too, because what preceded was then a whistle stop campaign. And if you're unfamiliar with historical political whistle stop campaigns, this used to be how people, especially running for president, would travel by train and they would stop at the train stations. They would stand on the back of the train. They would give their stump speech. They would give their speech to that community and then the train would roll on, right? So they were doing a whistle stop campaign, but what they were doing is they were on the train and they would stop in a town and then they would put on their show, their performance, and then they would move on to the next town.
Vote for Gracie, vote for Gracie. She's the best little skipper in the land. Vote for Gracie, vote for Gracie. Won't you please give this little girl a hand? That's me. Even big politicians don't know what to do. Gracie doesn't know either, but neither do you. So vote for Gracie. To win the presidential race, 100 million strong. That's right, you can't go wrong. Vote for Gracie. Keep voting all day long.
But I love everything about this. And I listened to it at election time in November most years, then following all of the Thanksgiving and Christmas episodes as we come into that. But so she announces her candidacy for president in March of 1940 and then proceeds to do this whistle stop campaign. But she says she's running for the surprise party. Right. So she creates this whole political party known as the surprise party because, as she explains to everyone, her father was a Republican and her mother was a Democrat and she was a surprise. And so the mascot of the party was not an elephant, it wasn't a donkey, it was a kangaroo.
Of course it was.
It was actually Laura, the kangaroo, who had a little baby Joey in its pouch. And then the slogan for her campaign was down with common sense. And then she would always make the campaign promise that it was in the bag and then point to
How clever.
the baby Joey in Laura's pouch. Her platform was exactly the things that you would expect Gracie Allen to have a platform for. She promised to resolve the border dispute between Florida and California.
Okay.
And she refused to appoint a vice president because she didn't want any vices in her administration.
Nice.
Right? So when they took the Whistle Stop tour, they went to 34 cities. This was a comedy tour that they did. Thousands of people showed up everywhere to stop and hear her stump speech. In Omaha, they had a surprise party convention where 8,000 people showed up and watched her accept the nomination to the surprise party as their presidential candidate.
That's fantastic.
So Nebraska showed up.
Good for you, Nebraska.
She ended up they were already a cultural phenomenon anyway.
Right.
This became a life of its own. Eleanor Roosevelt invited her to speak at the Women's National Press Club in D.C., where she famously answered a question about the Lend-Lease bill. She said, if we owe it, we should pay it. So,
nice.
Anyway, she's great. She was elected the mayor of Menominee in Michigan.
Menominee, Michigan.
They went ahead and elected her mayor. Unfortunately, she was disqualified from the election because it turned out she was a non-resident.
Oh.
So they elected her there anyway. She received thousands of write-in votes on election day.
That is so cool.
She did ultimately concede the election to FDR.
Right.
And she said that since the country was facing serious issues, she'd let the professionals handle it.
Good
but-
decision.
But here's the thing that I really, truly love about this story and the way that she did it and the things that she joked about and all of it. She ran a presidential campaign and people paid attention to her. They didn't pay attention to her as a woman. They paid attention to her as a person running for office. Even though it was satire, even though it was humorous, there was something that she was saying that resonated with them in a way that they went ahead and voted for her. And she's this, she's comedically and satirically bringing up very important issues.
Right.
Stephen Colbert did exactly the same thing. He was playing a character, right? He's playing this character who's running for president, this super conservative television host, what
Right.
have you. And that character pretty much ran for office, but he all along was satirical. He was saying, here are the things that are issues. Let's point and laugh at it, maybe pour a little salt in the wound, and then,
The court jesters of the day.
the court jesters. So she was actually talking about things like the amount of red tape that was required to get, some of the housing stuff that was being done with the public works stuff that they were doing to help people who'd lost homes and who were trying to access the public works projects. That there's a lot of red tape and a lot of things going on there. And so, those were things that they were poking fun at and making jokes about and were resonating with people because they were feeling that too. It's the same way. It's the same way Jon Stewart makes you feel. You're
Right.
like, thank God somebody's saying something about it. It's the absurdity of it. And so she really pioneered doing that on that level of actually becoming a character that steps into the absurdity.
And does nothing but raise attention and raise awareness of elections, of the election, of the current state of things, of what the electorate is thinking.
Right.
I mean, there was a lot of super serious stuff going on at the time, but it was really good the way that she brought attention to it
In her own way.
in a very funny and creative way.
And in a lot of ways, because it was such a high stakes election, her being present was a bit of a release valve for people too. There was a little bit of let's bring the temperature down a little bit. This is all still absurd.
Right.
So I encourage you highly to go and listen to Burns and Allen in general.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I encourage you to listen to these episodes in particular, the ones from 1940 as she runs for the surprise party. They bring me so much delight. And then, keep listening to the ones where they're Thanksgiving and Christmas because they make me giggle too. But yeah.
All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up for us for this week.
Hooray!
Next week, we're going to be talking about bamboo and
The deleted scenes of democracy.
why your campaign doesn't look like it does on TV.
Unless you're Gracie Allen.
Unless you're Gracie Allen.
Oh, no, she wasn't on TV yet.
Well, there you go. It's not going to look like it's on TV.
Yeah.
No matter who you are.
But it did look like it did on the radio.
It looks just like it looks on the radio. All right, so until we talk to you again, I'm Scott.
I'm B. Let's get ready to run.